Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I love this quote because it really applied to the 6 weeks we were able to go to Lake Forest Elementary and learn so much with these students. It was cool to see how each of them improved throughout the 6 weeks, and it was also a really awesome experience to be able to teach for the first real time in a real school setting. One of the boys that we had the privilege of working with improved so much throughout the 6 weeks. At the beginning, he was not really involved. He didn't want to be involved in the lessons. He didn't want to ask questions. He didn't want to answer questions, but it was cool to see him improve. My philosophy of social studies education is it is very important in the classroom. It is very important to teach students the history behind what they believe and why they believe it. It's very important to teach them about their culture and what makes them who they are. One of the quotes from the book that we used this year for our textbook is, "We as Americans suffer from extreme cultural myopia." And what this means to me is we get so caught up in how we believe and what we believe, but it was cool to be able to teach these kids about a little bit of history, a little bit of things that they probably would have never thought about before, and just giving them the opportunity to be able to see it in a different level. It was cool to be able to incorporate my biblical worldview into my teaching, even though I couldn't directly since we were in a public school. It was awesome to be able to share with them a little bit about why I believe what I believe, but not really telling them about the word directly. Each week, we taught a lesson. To begin with, we taught about the Industrial Revolution, and then we moved to inventions. My favorite part was definitely the inventions. One thing I noticed that really helped the students was giving them a quiz at the end of each lesson and being able to help them reflect on what they learned. I loved being able to see their faces light up whenever they figured out a new thing or they understood a new concept for the first time. As a teacher, it was cool to be able to be the facilitator and be able to really be able to explain the different things that we talked about. A big concept that I learned was it is very important to incorporate multiculturalism into the classroom. Being in a classroom where there were many different cultures represented and there were many different backgrounds, it was very important to incorporate this concept into it in a roundabout way. The students did a great job of understanding and just really applying it to what they were learning. My favorite part was being able to interact with the students and just having a little bit of one-on-one time with them and just really getting to know them on a more personal level than we would have any other way, especially when they had cool questions that I loved answering. One of my favorite lessons I taught was on inventions, and it really showed me how students think so differently because of the culture that they've grown up in. And I'm so glad that I was able to teach them about this little invention called the telegraph. It allowed them to see what it was like before we had phones, before we had texting and all that stuff. So it was really cool to be able to connect to each individual learner.
Now, does anyone remember what we talked about last week? What did we talk about? Segregation. And what about segregation?
I believe that social studies is very important, and I definitely look forward to teaching it in my classroom one day.
Okay, well,
I'm excited to be able to incorporate my worldview and be able to tell my students exactly why I believe what I believe, and I pray that one day I will be an effective
So first of all,
teacher.
I want you to think, what if you didn't have a telephone to communicate with anybody? You didn't have a phone at home. You didn't have a phone like that's your mom or your dad's. You didn't have an iPod. You